It's morning here in Latvia, but I think I should comment on some things that happened or were announced yesterday or in the past few days. One of them being that the Latvian gross domestic product (GDP) dropped by 18%, with other sub-indicators such as retail sales off 20, or rather industrial production off 22%, retail sales down by about as much, and the hotel and tourism business falling by 34%. Now, these are basically catastrophic results just on the face of it. But the more interesting thing with all of this is that while we are trying to cut public spending and cut the budget in order to meet the requirements of the International Monetary Fund, we have another problem reflected in these figures, and that is that when the GDP of a country falls by 18%, it directly affects the tax base. It directly affects those who are able to pay taxes and who have any kind of income. So now the ability of the government to support any kind of public services is not really going to be determined so much by the strictures imposed by the IMF or by the ability of the government to ease those strictures, as it's been reported that perhaps we can get away with a 7% of GDP budget deficit this year. Well, that's not going to happen because sort of all bets are off, because the actual decline in the tax base, as reflected by the decline in GDP, means there's just not going to be any funding available for even within the framework of 30% salary cuts across the public sector, 40% cuts of other kinds of spending. So we're edging toward what amounts to a basically collapse of public services, and a number of other unpleasant things were announced. That the payments made for parents staying home to take care of their kids are being drastically reduced, or they're being capped at 500 lats per month, which is at about $1,000. But there are really very few people who make the kind of salary where this amount would apply. Also, there is going to be no child support paid to children under the during the first year of life. And actually, of course, child support is a pittance here in Latvia. It amounts to about 8 lats per month, or $16 more or less. So, but for a lot of people in economic straits, or a lot of people who may be unemployed, this is a serious matter. The other thing, of course, about cutting these kinds of benefits is that basically what we are announcing is a kind of breach of the social contract, which I think I took up earlier when the Prime Minister had said that, we can discard the idea of being able to rely upon tax money bringing some benefits, such as pensions or medical care or whatever it's being spent for. So we now have another case of the breach of the social contract, whether anybody actually signed the social contract or not, but there it is. If you've been paying your taxes for years and planning to have a first or second child, and now it's going to cost you to stay home with that kid. Which means a lot of people will again consider switching Latvia for a better country in which to live. And all of this, of course, is taking place not in a totally honest and forthright country such as Finland or Denmark, but in a post-Soviet society where the tradition of evading taxes and of considering the government as your enemy, which actually may not be such a wrong perception of what the Latvian governments have been like over the past 20 years. But anyway, in addition to the decline in the tax base that is generated or caused by the fall in GDP, we are going to have another phenomenon, and that is the decline in tax payment that is going to occur because people simply don't see the economic logic of paying taxes, because this government has simply announced that we're breaking the social contract. You pay us, but we give you nothing. And then we get you into 7.5 billion euro in debt, and we have no real kind of scheme or plan as to how that's all going to be paid off. And we basically don't seem to really know what to do about anything anymore. Another piece of news is, of course, that there are serious international analysts saying that maybe what one has to do is to devalue the Latvian lat. So, sorry, use the D word, here come the police. But basically, the other thing that one could do is simply to make a one-sided switch over to the euro, which would temporarily solve some problems. The devaluation of the lat, or decoupling the lat from the whole uh, process of attempting to meet Maastricht standards on the euro and all that, would allow the government at least to print money for a short while and keep the decline in government salaries from being totally catastrophic. Oh, only piece of good news is that, of course, the inflation rate is going down. It was only 6.2% in April. It was higher in March, and actually between March and April, there was a small, less than 1% drop in various price indicators, which shows we're heading into deflation. But a lot of economic theorists will say deflation can even be worse than inflation, because in a situation of deflation, prices fall, wages fall, but such things as debt payments and the overall burden of indebtedness on society increases, because you have less income, but you still have to pay the same fixed amounts to the bank, or for any other number of things that are not as flexible as prices and wages. So the downward spiral toward what I would, sadly enough, have to say is a collapse of government finances here, and probably a catastrophic collapse of the economy as a whole, continues.